Not the worst offense in baseball this week. Not the worst.
Yeah.
Look,
Obviously.
change is afoot. Evan's back.
Yeah. Evan Carter's back. USC legend Brett Boone is now at the helm as the team's hitting coach. Uh, it's unfortunate. Coaching stuff is always difficult. I think in football, like with offensive coordinators, you can at least identify like, hey, he's calling these plays, right? And even if a quarterback is going rogue at the line, in theory, you're providing the framework, allowing them to do that. It's a lot tougher in baseball to understand, like, all right, hey, the hitting coach is responsible for X, Y, and Z. Some of these guys have their own swing coaches, guys that they talk to on a daily basis. Outside of that, it's always tough. But here's what we know. We know that the Rangers statistically have been at the bottom or near the bottom of the league in multiple relevant offensive categories, namely the most important one, which is runs scored. And that their lineup is way too talented to be dancing, on that dance floor, right? They are way, way more talented. Is this the best lineup in baseball, like going into the year? No, maybe not. But I think a lot of people thought this was a top 5, definitely top 10 offense. And, they started off slowly and it just hasn't gotten any better. And so you guys know as well as anyone that when stuff like that happens, a change needs to be made. And in this case, Donnie Ecker's time with the Rangers came to an end a couple of days ago, and a new voice will hopefully lead to, better results. But it got to a point where a change had to be made, fair or unfair. And I will say this, I applaud Chris Young. I think some people maybe sit back. They just kind of keep cruising, with their, Sunday highway speed, thinking, all right, well, these guys are really good. They're going to figure it out. But, Chris Young's never been one to just, be passive. He's a very aggressive GM, and he didn't want to wait to make a move.
Well, Donnie Ecker will get his tribute video when he returns someday. All those Donnie Ecker things we remember.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, to Jared's point, though, it does suck. I remember hearing this about even, like, Washed, that there was a time where they were going to fire him, and then they, like, won 3 in a row.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah, I remember that.
It was his birthday. That's right. They didn't want to fire him because it was his birthday, and then they.
Right. That's where they need a Nico.
And in my head, I'm like,
yo, your mom's dying. Hey, before she dies,
you're fired.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to tell everyone you sucked.
Go back to her now.
Well, I guess my point is just I don't know anything about Donnie Ecker. I know what hitting coaches are trying to do. I know it's hard because guys have other guys. But also, it's like Seager leaves the lineup, and they never really got a chance to try what you brought up to us a few weeks ago of, Langford at the top. Hopefully you can move Semien and Seager a little bit. A guy gets hurt, and all of a sudden your offense falls apart. Now you're fired. And I guess that's just the way it is. But I feel like if Corey Seager doesn't get hurt and continues to hit roughly similarly to how he was, he's probably not fired.
The move is also somewhat performative for fans, maybe.
It definitely is. It's just not. I get it.
It's like what you got to do.
I'll say this, guys. Bruce Bochy's never made a coaching change. Not that he was the one driving this, but he's never had a staff change in the middle of the season in his career up until now. And
oh wow,
Jake, I hear you, right? Like I totally. It's always been tough. Like when I used to have to do extra innings after our post-game show, which is where we would take the calls. There's always need to fire this guy, need to fire that guy, and I want to engage with these fans who are passionate enough to call in and have these opinions. It always has been tough for me to engage in coaching change related conversations because there's so much we don't know. But I think if a move was made, I don't know that it was as simple as if Corey Seager was healthy, this move would not have been made. Because I'm just not a believer that, we've seen Shohei Ohtani play for the Angels and that team not sniff the playoffs. Like one guy is as great as Corey Seager is, and he is one of the 5 best hitters in baseball. There's no doubt about it. But I don't know that one move, I don't know that one player totally changes things. I think that in order for this move to be made, there probably needed to be a level of cohesion and collaboration. And I just think in general, it's clear with the direction they're going, although we haven't spoken to Brett Boone. We'll do that here shortly. But my guess is Brett Boone is not a guy, because I've listened to a little bit of his podcast, he's not a guy who's going to throw all sorts of beautiful mind-esque equations at you. he is going to try simplify things. It's a direction that the Mariners went very similarly last year with Edgar Martinez after Dan Wilson took over as their manager. That's not to say the numbers and the data, which I love and I know a lot of people love and believe is beneficial, will not be a part of it. But I think it might be differently synthesized, getting from the analysts and the coaches to the players, because I think to some degree, these guys, even like watching a guy consistently be late on a 2-0 fastball down the chute, tells me that there's a hesitancy, a passiveness, a lack of conviction in what you're trying to do. And I don't know if that's because there's too much up here. I will tell you that there have been those who have maybe suggested something like that. But I think that clearing the heads of some of these guys, giving them the information they need to get in smaller bites based on the player, some like more, some like less, but making sure that when they step in the box, as corny as this seems, that they have the mentality of it's me versus the pitcher and I'm a badass and I'm going to beat him, and not having to worry about some of the other stuff. I think that might be the change that the Rangers hope will just help free these guys up, because there are too many guys. Jock Peterson might not be the Jock Peterson of last year, but he certainly isn't this Jock Peterson, right? He can be twice as productive as he is now and still wouldn't be the guy he was last year. For him to be in a rut the way he is, clearly, something has not been tapped into. Adolis Garcia's swing decisions are worse this year than they were last year. Something is not being tapped into. Marcus Semien has gone off to another slow start. I think when you have veterans like this, I just think it's important that, if you're going to make a change, you make a change early on, so you give the new guy the runway to get acclimated and give these guys enough time to make changes so that, hopefully this slow starts in the rear view pretty quickly.
But don't you think that puts a little more pressure on him, seeing Berger get sit down, Leote DFA'd or wavered? Does that, and we might hear Adolis might be next, and not wavered, but something. But do you not feel like that puts extra pressure on these guys?
Blake, it's a great question. And I think, we talk about this all the time. I think specifically with closers, right? The minute a guy blows a save, everyone wants to change the closer. And I think we saw this with Jeff Bannister. I don't know as much with Chris Woodward because it wasn't always about the stats. But with Bruce Bochy, there's a loyalty that I think great managers have that instills confidence in players that, hey, it's one bad game is not going to wreck things. This year with the batting order, right? People wanted to make changes right away. Sticking with Marcus Semien after a down last season to begin the year, ultimately making a change, but not knee-jerking, right? Finding the right timing. I think that's where Bruce Bochy comes into play, Blake. We've had Elvis on a few pre- and post-game shows, and Elvis, I think, had a great point a couple weeks ago about how this is like, people want to know how a manager impacts a team. Yes, they make the lineup and they make pitching changes and whatnot, but it's situations like this where a manager can really help. And I think with Leote, ultimately the production just hadn't been there. And these guys aren't blind, right? They know how their teammates are and are not doing. And so I think it's a healthy balance between, we want there to be a fire lit under your ass. You do need to produce. We're not just going to rely on the back of your baseball card to eventually show up, because we're trying to win a division and trying to win a World Series, balanced with hey, if you go 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts, it's okay, right? But Adolis Garcia has been one of the lowest graded performers in baseball so far this year. And Jake Berger was not off to a good start at all. And, changes needed to be made. And Jake's going to be back, right? And hopefully he'll be back and be more the guy that the Rangers, saw last year as an opponent in the last few years. But I do think it's a balance. But at the end of the day, you can't give these guys just unlimited runway. And we're 35, 36 games into the season, 37, whatever it is. We're not halfway through the season. We're not even a quarter of the way through the season, but I think we're enough into the season to where, guys need to start, understanding that if they don't perform, things are going to change. And I'll use Adolis as an example, but they've already moved him down to 7th in the order, right? Like that's the first step. And that's a slow, hey, we're not going to knee jerk, but we need you to produce. And that's the first warning. And maybe they give him a few days next time. I don't know. But at some point, you got to start producing.